The Resistance base was in chaos when they arrived. The destruction of the Blood Fist had sent shockwaves throughout the sector, and reports were flooding in from across the galaxy. Orc fleets were mobilizing, human resistance cells were emerging from hiding, and the galactic news networks were broadcasting footage of the station's destruction on every channel. "It's incredible," Dr. Chen said as she reviewed the data. "The energy readings from the explosion are off the charts. What exactly did you do out there?" Janice sat in the medical bay, her body still humming with residual energy from the device. The alien artifact had finally detached from her suit, but she could still feel its influence in her mind. She was changed, transformed in ways she was only beginning to understand. "I used the device to destabilize the station's reactor," she said, her voice carrying harmonics that hadn't been there before. "Then I reversed the polarity of its gravity generators." "Reversed the polarity?" Dr. Chen's eyes widened. "That should have been impossible. The power requirements alone." "The device doesn't follow normal physics," Janice explained. "It rewrites the rules as it goes. But there's a cost." She looked at her hands, seeing the faint patterns of light that danced beneath her skin. "I'm not entirely human anymore." Harrison limped into the medical bay, his face grim. "We're getting reports from across the sector. The Orcs are mobilizing their entire fleet. Whatever we did, we've definitely gotten their attention." "Good," Janice said. "Let them come. We're ready for them." "Are we?" Harrison asked. "Because from what I'm hearing, Gordhak himself is coming. The conqueror of worlds, the destroyer of civilizations. He's bringing his entire battle fleet." "How many ships?" "Thousands. Maybe tens of thousands. Every Orc warship in the sector is converging on our position." Janice stood, and the others stepped back involuntarily. There was something about her now, an aura of power that made the air itself seem to thrum with energy. "Then we'll give them a fight they'll never forget." "With what?" Torres asked. "We've got maybe 100 fighters, a handful of frigates, and a lot of courage. Against Gordhak's armada, that's nothing. We have the device," Janice said simply. "The device is nearly depleted," Dr. Chen protested. "According to my scans, it has maybe 2 or 3 uses left. After that, it becomes inert. Then we'll have to make those uses count." Janice turned to the holographic display, showing the approaching Orc fleet. "How long until they arrive?" 18 hours, Harrison said. "Maybe less if they push their engines. Then we have 18 hours to prepare. I want every ship we have ready for battle. Every weapon charged, every shield at maximum power. And I want volunteers for a special mission." "What kind of mission?" Torres asked. "We're going to take the fight to them. Instead of waiting for Gordhak to come to us, we're going to meet him halfway. And we're going to show him what happens when you underestimate humanity." The next 18 hours were a blur of activity. The Resistance fleet, such as it was, prepared for battle. Weapons were checked and rechecked, ships were fueled and armed, and the underground base was evacuated. Every non-combatant was moved to hidden shelters, deep beneath the planet's surface. Janice spent the time in meditation, communing with the device and trying to understand the full extent of her transformation. She was no longer entirely human, that much was clear. But she was also not entirely alien. She was something new, something that had never existed before. She could feel the approach of the Orc fleet, their crude minds burning with thoughts of violence and conquest. Gordhak was among them, his presence like a dark star in the fabric of space. He was ancient and powerful, a being who had conquered countless worlds and enslaved billions of souls. But he had never faced anything like what she had become. The battle began at the edge of the system, where the Resistance fleet waited in ambush. The Orc armada was vast, stretching across millions of kilometers of space. Their ships were crude but powerful, built for war and conquest rather than elegance or efficiency. "Here they come," Torres said from the bridge of the Resistance flagship. "Sensors are picking up the lead elements of their fleet." Janice stood at the center of the bridge, the Omega device floating beside her in a containment field. Its surface pulsed with inner light, responding to her thoughts and emotions. She could feel its power calling to her, urging her to use it. But she waited. The device had only a few uses left, and she needed to make them count. The first wave of Orc ships emerged from hyperspace, their hulls scarred with battle damage and their weapons already charging. They were led by a massive dreadnought, its prow shaped like a skull and its hull decorated with the bones of conquered enemies. "That's the Gordhack's flagship," Harrison said, his voice tight with tension. "The Bone Crusher. It's got enough firepower to level a planet. Then we'll have to make sure it doesn't get the chance," Janice said. She reached out with her transformed consciousness, touching the device's alien awareness. "All ships prepare for battle. And remember, we're not just fighting for ourselves. We're fighting for every human who's ever lived." The battle was joined with a fury that shook the very fabric of space. The Resistance fleet, outnumbered 100 to 1, fought with desperate courage. Their ships darted and weaved through the Orc formation, using their superior speed and maneuverability to avoid the enemy's crushing firepower. But it wasn't enough. One by one, the Resistance ships were being destroyed, their crews dying in the cold vacuum of space. The Orc fleet was simply too powerful, too numerous. It was a massacre in the making. "We're losing," Torres said, his voice filled with despair. "We've lost 30% of our fleet, and we've barely scratched them." "Then it's time," Janice said. She activated the device, feeling its power flow through her transformed consciousness. "Target the Bone Crusher. We're going to give Gordhack a personal demonstration of human ingenuity." The device's power reached out across the void, touching the massive Orc dreadnought. Janice could feel the ship's structure in her mind, its hull plates and armor belts, its weapons and engines. And she began to change them. The transformation was subtle at first. The Bone Crusher's armor began to soften, its molecular structure shifting from hardened steel to something more like putty. Its weapons turned inward, their targeting systems confused by the ship's altered geometry. And its engines began to burn in reverse, slowing the ship instead of propelling it forward. "What's happening to their flagship?" Torres asked in amazement. "I'm turning it into a work of art," Janice said, her voice filled with dark humor. "Something that will remind Gordhack of the price of underestimating humanity." The Bone Crusher was transforming, its hull flowing like liquid metal. Its skull-shaped prow became a flower, its weapon batteries became leaves, and its engines became roots that spread through the ship's structure. In minutes, the mighty dreadnought had become a sculpture of metal and energy, beautiful and utterly harmless. The Orc fleet recoiled in shock and terror. They had never seen anything like it. Their flagship, the symbol of their power and dominance, had been turned into a mockery of their military might. "Gordhack is hailing us," the communications officer reported. "Put him through," Janice said. The main screen flickered to life, showing the interior of an Orc command bridge. And there, in the center of the chaos, stood Gordhack the Conqueror. He was massive even by Orc standards, his green skin covered in ritual scars and his eyes burning with ancient malice. "Human," he said, his voice a low growl. "You dare to mock the might of the Gordhack Empire?" "I dare to do more than mock it," Janice replied. "I dare to end it." Gordhack's eyes narrowed. "You think your alien trinket makes you my equal? I have conquered 1,000 worlds, slain 1,000,000 champions. I am the destroyer of civilizations, the bringer of endings. And I am the bringer of change," Janice said. "The herald of a new age. Your time is over, Gordhack. The age of the Orcs is ending. We shall see." Gordhack raised his massive war axe, its blade gleaming with dark energy. "I challenge you to single combat, human. Come to my ship and face me, if you dare." Janice smiled, and the expression was both beautiful and terrifying. "I accept." The docking bay of Gordhack's command ship was a cathedral of violence, its walls lined with the skulls of conquered enemies, and its floor stained with the blood of countless battles. Janice stepped off her shuttle, the Omega device floating beside her like a faithful companion. The transformed energy of the artifact had changed her even further during the journey, her human form now crackling with barely contained power. Gordhak stood waiting in the center of the bay, his massive form dwarfing the orc warriors who surrounded him. He was a creature of nightmares, his green skin scarred by millennia of warfare, his eyes burning with the malevolent intelligence of a being who had watched civilizations rise and fall. "So," he said, his voice echoing through the vast space, "the human comes to die. I come to end this," Janice replied, her voice carrying harmonics that made the air itself vibrate. "To free the galaxy from your tyranny." Gordhak laughed, a sound like grinding stone. "Tyranny? I bring order to chaos, strength to weakness. I am the natural evolution of life itself, the strong ruling the weak, as it should be." "You're a relic," Janice said, walking forward into the circle of orc warriors. "A throwback to a more primitive age. Your time is over. My time will never be over," Gordhak snarled. "I am eternal, unchanging. I am the constant in a universe of variables. Then let me introduce you to change." The battle began without warning. Gordhak moved with surprising speed for his size, his war axe cleaving through the air where Janice had been standing. But she was no longer there, her transformed form moving with inhuman grace as she dodged the massive blade. She didn't fight with conventional weapons. Instead, she used the power of the device, reshaping reality around her as she moved. The floor beneath Gordhak's feet turned to quicksand, then to ice, then to molten metal. The air itself became her weapon, condensing into solid barriers or explosive bursts of force. But Gordhak was no ordinary opponent. He had faced gods and demons, conquered beings of immense power. His war axe was more than just a weapon, it was a tool of reality itself, capable of cutting through the very fabric of existence. "You fight like a coward," he growled, his axe trailing dark energy as he swung it. "Using tricks and illusions instead of honest strength." "I fight like someone who's evolved beyond brute force," Janice replied, her form flickering between dimensions as she avoided his attacks. "Someone who understands that true power comes from knowledge, not muscle." She reached out with the device again, this time targeting Gordhak himself. She tried to transform him as she had his flagship, to turn the mighty conqueror into something harmless. But his will was too strong, his consciousness too deeply rooted in violence and conquest. The transformation began, then reversed itself, leaving him unchanged. "You cannot change what I am," Gordhak said, his voice filled with dark triumph. "I am beyond your power, beyond your understanding. I am the void between the stars, the hunger that devours worlds." "Then perhaps it's time to feed that hunger," Janice said. She stopped trying to transform Gordhak and instead reached out to the space around him. The docking bay was part of a massive starship, and that ship was surrounded by the vacuum of space. She began to alter the fundamental constants of physics in the immediate area, changing the relationship between matter and energy. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. The air began to burn, not with fire but with the pure energy of matter conversion. The deck plates began to dissolve, their molecular bonds breaking down at the quantum level. And in the center of it all, Gordhak stood unmoved, his ancient power protecting him from the chaos. "Impressive," he said, his voice carrying easily through the energy storm. "But you still don't understand what you're dealing with." He raised his war axe, and the blade began to glow with dark light. The energy surrounding them was drawn into the weapon, absorbed and transformed into something else, something hostile to the very concept of change. "This blade has tasted the blood of reality itself," Gordhak said. "It has cut through the dreams of gods and severed the hopes of entire civilizations. And now it will cut through you." He swung the axe, and Janice felt the blade pass through her transformed form. There was no pain, no physical sensation at all. But she could feel something vital being severed, some essential part of her being cut away. The device's power flickered and dimmed. Her transformed consciousness began to fragment, the alien patterns of thought dissolving back into merely human awareness. She was becoming mortal again, vulnerable to the physical laws that govern normal existence. "You see?" Gordhak said, advancing on her with predatory grace. "In the end, all power fades. All transformation reverses. There is only the eternal struggle between the strong and the weak, and I am the strongest of all. But Janice was not finished. As her consciousness returned to its human limitations, she found something that her transformed state had hidden from her, her essential humanity. The device had changed her, made her something more than human. But it had also threatened to make her something less. She was a soldier, a protector, a leader. She fought not for conquest or domination, but for the simple right of her species to exist. And that purpose, that purely human drive to protect and preserve, was something that no cosmic force could transform or destroy. "You're right," she said, struggling to her feet. "All power fades. All transformation reverses. But some things are eternal." She reached for the device one final time, not to change herself or Gordhak, but to change the fundamental nature of the confrontation itself. Instead of trying to transform the Orc conqueror, she transformed the space around them, creating a pocket of reality where the normal laws of physics didn't apply. In this new space, strength was not measured by physical power or magical artifacts, but by the purity of one's purpose. And in that realm, Janice found herself standing as an equal to the mighty Gordhak. "What have you done?" he demanded, his voice no longer carrying the weight of absolute authority. "I've leveled the playing field," she replied. "Here, in this space, we are what we truly are. Not conqueror and conquered, not alien and human, but two beings fighting for what they believe in." "And what do you believe in?" Gordhak asked, his war axe now just a normal weapon in his hands. "I believe in the future," Janice said. "In the possibility of change, of growth, of becoming something better than what we were. I believe in hope." "Hope is weakness," Gordhak said. "It is the delusion of the powerless." "Then show me the strength of despair," Janice replied. "Show me the power of hopelessness." They fought then, not with cosmic forces or reality-shaping devices, but with the simple tools of war. Gordhak's axe against Janice's sidearm, brute strength against tactical intelligence, the philosophy of domination against the principle of liberation. The battle raged across the transformed docking bay, their conflict reshaping the very nature of the space around them. Each blow struck was also a philosophical argument, each dodge a statement of principle. They were not just fighting for victory, but for the right to define what victory meant. And in the end, it was Janice's humanity that gave her the edge. Gordhak fought for himself, for his own glory and dominance. But Janice fought for something greater, for the millions of humans enslaved across the galaxy, for the children who deserved to grow up free, for the future that could be built if the present tyranny was overthrown. Her final shot took Gordhak in the chest, the plasma bolt burning through his ancient armor and into his heart. He staggered, his massive form swaying like a tree in the wind. This is not possible," he gasped. "I am eternal. I am unchanging." "Nothing is eternal," Janice said gently. "Nothing is unchanging. That's the beauty of existence. There's always the possibility of something new, something better." Gordhak fell to his knees, his war axe clattering to the deck. "What comes next?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "That depends on you," Janice replied. "You can cling to the old ways, to the philosophy of domination and conquest. Or you can choose to change, to become something new. I don't know how to change. Few of us do at first. But the important thing is to try." Gordhak looked at her with eyes that were no longer filled with malevolent fire, but with something approaching wonder. "You would spare me? After everything I've done?" "I would give you the chance to become something better," Janice said. "The choice is yours." The pocket of altered reality began to dissolve, the normal laws of physics reasserting themselves. The docking bay returned to its original state, the energy storm fading to nothing. And in the center of it all, two beings stood facing each other, one dying, one transformed. "The device," Gordhak said, his voice growing weaker. "It has one use left, doesn't it?" Janice looked at the Omega device, its surface now dim and lifeless. "How did you know?" "I can feel it. The quantum resonance patterns are almost depleted. One more use, and then it becomes inert." He smiled, an expression that was both terrible and beautiful on his scarred features. Use it wisely, human. Use it to create something worthy of the cost. And then he was gone, his ancient consciousness finally at peace. The greatest conqueror in galactic history had passed away, not in battle or glory, but in the quiet hope that something better might take his place. Janice stood alone in the docking bay, surrounded by the stunned Orc warriors who had witnessed their leader's defeat. They looked at her with a mixture of fear and uncertainty, unsure of what came next. "The war is over," she said, her voice carrying to every corner of the ship. "But the future is just beginning." The transformation of the galaxy began immediately. With Gordhak's death, the Orc Empire began to fragment, its various factions turning on each other in a brutal civil war. But Janice was ready. Using the device's final charge, she didn't reshape matter or energy, she reshaped information itself, sending a message to every sentient being in the galaxy. It was a simple message, but it carried the weight of absolute truth. The age of conquest was over. The time of cooperation had begun. The effect was immediate and profound. Across thousands of worlds, humans emerged from hiding, their hope rekindled by the news of Gordhak's defeat. Alien species that had been enslaved for generations began to remember what freedom meant. And even among the Orcs themselves, a new consciousness began to emerge, one that questioned the old ways and sought something better. Not everyone embraced the change. There were those who clung to the old philosophies, who preferred the certainty of oppression to the uncertainty of freedom. Wars were fought, battles were won and lost, and the galaxy bled as it struggled to birth a new age. But gradually, slowly, the vision began to take shape. The Terran Federation was reformed, not as a human empire but as a truly galactic confederation. The Centauri Republic was reborn, its ancient traditions of diplomacy and trade helping to bridge the gaps between species. Even the Orcs found a place in the new order, their warrior culture channeled into peacekeeping and exploration rather than conquest. It wasn't perfect. There were still conflicts, still injustices, still those who sought to exploit the weak. But it was better than what had come before, and it carried within it the seeds of something even greater. Janice lived to see the first generation of children born into the new age, human, Orc, and alien youngsters who grew up playing together, learning together, building together. They didn't see species differences as barriers to be overcome, but as resources to be shared. They were the future made manifest, the living proof that change was not only possible but inevitable. When she finally died, 50 years after the Battle of Gordhak, Janice was remembered not as a conqueror or a destroyer, but as a gardener. She had planted the seeds of change and tended them carefully, nurturing them into something beautiful and lasting. The galaxy she left behind was not the galaxy she had been born into. It was something new, something unprecedented in the history of the universe. It was proof that even the darkest night could give way to dawn, that even the most entrenched tyranny could be overcome by the simple human capacity for hope. And in the end, that was perhaps the greatest victory of all, not the defeat of an enemy, but the creation of a future worth fighting for. A century later, the galaxy had become something that neither Gordhak nor the old Federation could have imagined. The Omega device had been studied, understood, and ultimately transcended. Its power to reshape reality had been replaced by something far more profound, the collective will of billions of beings working together toward a common goal. The garden metaphor that had been used to describe Janice's legacy had become literal. Worlds that had been stripped bare by Orc industry were now green and growing, their ecosystems restored by the combined efforts of human technology and alien wisdom. The void between stars, once seen as an empty wasteland, was now crisscrossed with streams of light, communication networks that bound the galaxy together in a web of shared knowledge and understanding. Children born in this new age would sometimes ask about the old times, about the wars and the conquests, and the dark years of the Orc Empire. Their teachers would tell them stories of heroes and villains, of battles won and lost, of the price that had been paid for the freedom they now enjoyed. But they would also tell them about the future, about the new worlds being discovered, the new species being encountered, the new challenges that awaited them among the stars. They would speak of the great work that still lay ahead, the long journey toward a truly perfect society. And always they would remember the words that had been carved into the memorial on the world where Janice had been born. The future is not a destination, but a journey. And the journey begins with a single step. The galaxy had taken that step, and it would never look back.